People driving along South Columbus in Philadelphia, they see this ship, this 1950s-era ocean liner that's seemingly derelict and abandoned.
And there on the Delaware River is this faded ocean liner just sitting there.
And it's massive. It's 12 stories high. It's 990 feet long. You cannot miss it. And it's been there so long that it's become a part of the landscape.
The funnels thrust up just like smokestacks from the cement factory across the Delaware River in Camden.
It's a landmark for people. Oh, make a right at the big ship, you know? And despite the fact that this beautiful ship is sitting there, people don't pay her any attention.
I think they have no idea how this ship came to Philadelphia, why she is here, how long she'll stay. The ship is a big mystery.
The irony is that right there in Philadelphia, in the home of the Liberty Bell and Independence Hall, the birthplace of this great nation, they don't know what that ship is.
I know it's been here for a while. How long, I don't know.
And there are truck drivers who drive past this massive ship every day.
I know it's pretty big. It just says United States on there.
Looks like it was a cruise ship.
It looked like a little tugboat.
Little tugboat?
Yeah.
Okay. Wrong.
She's been forgotten, and I think that needs to change.
It's bigger than the Titanic. That's a big surprise.
They have no idea that this massive ship that's sitting there is the SS United States, our nation's flagship, one of the crowning maritime achievements of the 20th century, if not the crowning maritime achievement.
She is one of a very few vintage, classic ocean liners still with us. She's like a lady in waiting. I think people would love the chance to sail on her.
To look at her just could thrill you with pride and wonder. She just is a magnificent looking boat.
When it was in service, this ship could go faster in reverse than any of our ships today can go forward.
This was the fastest ship in the world in 1952 when it took the blue ribbon away from the Queen Mary.
She was built like a battleship, solid and strong, and she plowed through these rough North Atlantic seas.
Everybody that sailed her felt that experience, felt that American experience, that New York experience, that United States experience.
You knew that this was an American ship. You knew that this was the pride of our nation.
People came from afar just to see her in harbor.
She sailed from New York, and everything, just imagine New York City at that time, the grandeur and the speed of New York and that pace put into a ship.
Her booms were silver-coated, her lifeboats were in perfect order. She was always immaculate.
During the heyday of the transatlantic liner, ships were ships of state.
France had the longest, the British had the biggest, and we had the fastest.
And the SS United States certainly was our ship of state.
She has this sort of magic aura about her. She has these gorgeous good looks, which were all sucked in by a pretty face, beautiful design, those raked funnels. She just appeals to you like that good friend that you always want to see.
It was just the perfect design to do what she would do, carry passengers in comfort and in the greatest speed ever made in the Atlantic Ocean.
When she turned those screws, I mean, she would just leap out of the water.
This ship still holds the speed record.
No liner has ever come close and never will.
Safety, speed, and style.
This enormous sense of reliability, punctuality, American efficiency, that on-time quality.
And all done with a huge degree of style and comfort, which we just don't see today.
The food and the service were impeccable.
I think this old ship can capture people's hearts and imagination in a way that most modern ships cannot.
It's extraordinary, really, that she's still here.
It's well rested now, so bring it back out on high seas again.
She's not done yet, and she's waiting for her next chance.
I pass by it every year there sailing in my boat, and each year to watch it get rustier, dirtier, wind was broken out of it.
And I saw the condition that she's in now. A cry just came out of my throat. It was just of sadness.
This is a crime against shipbuilding, a crime against history.
The greatest country on the face of the earth has allowed this significant piece of American history to just fade into obscurity and literally fade.
It was tear-jerking to see it lying up there in that yard and just going to pieces and nobody caring. And it showed a callousness in the American public that it would let such a ship die such a miserable death.
But she is still here.
What's the reason for her being here when all the other ships have been gone and laid up and scrapped? If that reason wasn't for her to come back out again, to be completely retrofitted, to be re-engined, to be put back in service, then I don't know what it would be for.
There would be a restoration of American pride in something it should be very proud of.
I want to see her brought back to her place in history, and I want school kids to know what that ship is and why it's really, really cool.
I have a personal connection to the ship, obviously because my grandfather designed it. When I had children of my own, I became more curious, as people often do, about my family legacy and wanting them to know more about it. And so, I literally just logged onto the computer one night. To my shock, really, this ship was still floating. We traveled to Philadelphia. My daughter was fascinated to see the ship. She knew that she had encountered something truly special. On the one hand, it was sad because she looked nothing like the pictures I'd seen on the internet of this gleaming beacon with the bright red, white, and blue funnels tied up with all these lines, and you just really had the sense that she could pop those lines. There was still a sense of power there. I was encouraged that she'd lasted that long.
William Francis Gibbs was the preeminent naval architect of the 20th century.
My grandfather had no formal training in naval architecture or marine engineering.
Gibbs had been trained as an attorney but hated the law, used to spend his summers on the Jersey Shore and saw all these big liners coming out of New York Harbor. But a nationalist, he realized they were all foreign. Why don't we have a big ship?
After practicing law for one miserable year, he decided he was going to design the biggest ship in the world.
William Francis Gibbs got the job of converting a big German liner, the Vaterland, into the Leviathan after the First World War, and got the notice of the American government and began to design a series of very outstanding American passenger ships.
I've been told that he designed 70% of the United States fleet during World War II.
Victory ships, landing ships, troop ships, all sorts of vessels.
5,500 vessels overall. World War II certainly kept him busy. He had a very salty tongue. He would wear the same hat at all times. It was basically threadbare. In fact, I had no idea he had even achieved fame.
Everything I've read about him, I think that he was just this kind of wonderful curmudgeon.
At the end of World War II, we had to pay millions of dollars to Britain to bring our troops home, and so my grandfather could design the big ship, and it could have this dual purpose of enormously fast speed, but it could be justified as a public expense.
Daddy felt that Gibbs & Cox was the finest engineering company that he knew of, so they got together on this dream of theirs.
This meant that our country was about to build a superliner that would write headlines in American maritime history. On a cold February morning in 1950, we laid her keel. American know-how began building the greatest ship in the world.
A ship that will give every American another reason for pride in the accomplishments of his fellow workers and his country.
She was a rather unconventional ocean liner. She was actually designed to be a secret weapon in the Cold War.
In fact, her hull and engine design were classified top secret.
should World War III come, we would need a big troop ship of our own.
And instead of carrying 1,500 paying guests from New York, it could carry 15,000 troops to whatever theater they needed to go to.
So efficient that she could transport an entire Army division from San Francisco to Asia and return home without stopping for fuel, fresh water, or provisions.
Something that the competitors, the Queen Elizabeth and the Queen Mary, couldn't come close to achieving.
So this was a Navy-sponsored boat.
My name is Robert Wogan. I am preparing the SS United States for its second lighting. I did it years ago. I lit the stacks, radar mast, and bridge. These corners go to the lights. We'll just duct tape it, you know, like do a 2-layer. My motives were to give the ship 15 minutes of fame before I thought it would really be sailed off into this scrapyard sunset.
I believe, had she been on that voyage across the North Atlantic on April the 14th of 1912, was it, when the Titanic, she would not have sunk.
The outstanding thing about this ship is what the Navy calls the power of survival. It is the power that the ship has of staying afloat and not burning up in case of an accident, collision, or a fire breaking out on board.
They never called her unsinkable, but she was amazingly resistant to all sorts of the dilemmas that face ships. She had an extra solid hull, she had that double engine room, so she was built to the highest specifications.
The ship was a 5-compartment ship, as opposed to today's 2-compartment ships, and the new standard that's being introduced of 3-compartment.
You could flood 5 of the largest compartments of this vessel up to the waterline and it would still float and not sink.
Which no one else has done then or since then.
It's amazing to be walking around and trying to connect what this was like when it was alive. Well, my mother gave me some pictures and said, oh, by the way, here's some pictures of your grandmother on the ship. So that really made it personal for me. I like to go to the places where those photographs were taken and then put my camera in exactly the same spot that the picture was taken and then shoot the same picture again, except 50 years later. Just walk where my grandparents walked, sit on the same bar stool my grandfather used to drink at down in the cabin class lounge. It's deja vu, except that I was never here in the first place.
It was a completely fireproof ship.
My grandfather was an absolute fanatic when it came to fire safety.
William Francis Gibbs had a phobia about fire.
February 9th, 1942, the Normandy afire. Millions stood in awe when the Normandy first reached America on its triumphant maiden voyage. Again, millions line the New York and New Jersey shores to sadly observe the passing of the doomed and ill-fated ship.
He had inspected the Normandy and he was well reminded of what fire could do to a ship.
People who traveled aboard the French line ships and the English ships back in the 50s and 60s, they got on the United States and they couldn't find any wood to knock on for good luck. You know, they were like, where's the wood?
It was not my favorite ship. The wood, I think, added so much to the charm of the ship, which the SS United States didn't have.
It was loaded with asbestos, which was, of course, a miracle material at the time the ship was being built. The famous story is the only wood on the ship.
The only wood on board.
The only wood.
The only thing that would burn on that ship was
the butcher's block.
Butcher blocks.
The chopper's block.
And in the pianos.
Piano and the butcher's block.
Gibbs actually tried to get Steinway to manufacture an aluminum piano.
Steinway was just about ready to build him this aluminum piano, but he said, let me give you a demonstration, and poured gasoline over it and tried to ignite it, and it wouldn't burn. Gibbs relented, and the ship was equipped with a wooden Steinway piano.
And I can only imagine what social life on the ship would have been had he not allowed pianos on board.
The people who contributed to the design and construction of the SS United States understood what they were doing. They knew that they were trying for the greatest ship in the world, and they knew that they were doing it as trustees for the citizens of the United States.
The 48 states at the time were represented in the construction of this ship, whether they supplied material or artwork.
The great industrial power of the United States is represented
It's that romantic, bygone, high-quality era, like a cathedral being constructed. It's made to last forever.
It is the best rendition of a ship that I've ever seen.
We finally caught our initial glimpse of the big ship. I think our first impression was her beauty. Then as we came near, we were overwhelmed by her great size. The afternoon at the shipyard was thrilling. The crowd was enormous. Photographers seemed to be all over the place. I had never seen William Francis look happier. He was attired in his khaki coveralls, sat down on the dock, and just looked. It was rather an eerie feeling to realize we were nearly the last people to gaze on the bottom of this big ship.
Mrs. Tom Connolly, wife of the then senator from Texas, smashes the champagne bottle across the bow of the ship. I christen the United States.
I could not help thinking, she must be a peace ship. She represents America at peace.
If I could get in a time machine, there is only one destination for me, and that would be July 3rd, 1952, noon in New York at Pier 86. I would be aboard that maiden voyage.
New York City to Le Havre, France, and Southampton, England. For those who sailed on her, it will be a day long remembered.
It was very exciting. There were airplanes flying, there were whistles blowing, there were flags all over, there were fire boats out, all spraying, you know, all the whistles and everything. It was very, very exciting.
Margaret Truman was on board and her friend Drusy Snyder. You just felt the excitement the minute you put your foot on her.
There was live music playing as the ship backed away, and there was the excitement when you started to feel the shudder of the ship under your feet.
They didn't know, of course, how fast she was going to be.
Would she take the blue ribbon? Would she beat the Queen Mary? Would it be in Yankee hands?
We seemed to know from the start that she was out to break the record, and so there was an air of excitement.
As we neared Bishop's Rock off England's coast, our pride in the new First Lady of the Seas mounted with each passing hour. Somehow we knew she would fulfill the role for which she was destined.
We waited by the radio, and my mom kept saying, no, not yet. I'll let you know when it's close.
From the chart room to the engine room, a glorious effort was being made to prove America's merchant marine supremacy.
It was about 1 or 2 in the morning. Margaret Truman, Drusy Snyder, and about 6 newspaper reporters, all dancing the conga. And I was the lead, full of champagne. So I said, let's all go up to the bridge. Commodore Manning was at the wheel, and he looked around as if in shock. He said, Miss Truman, we're about to break the record. Would you like to put your finger on the wheel? She very sweetly said, let Laura do it. So I put my finger on the wheel, and he said, now get out of here. I had my finger on the wheel for 1 second. That's right.
We literally screamed with delight when the news flashed. SS United States smashes the Queen Mary's record.
3 days, 10 hours, 40 minutes. Average speed over 35 knots.
So fast that the speed of the water sandblasted the paint from her bow.
About 4,000 people have grandstand seats for the big entrance. In the last 100 years, it has been broken 29 times. By the Americans, by the British, the Germans, the Italians, the French, and now by America again.
The news was flashed around the world. Headlines in Dublin, London, Rome, Stockholm, Copenhagen, Brussels, Geneva. For the first time in almost 100 years, an American ship flying the American flag had regained the transatlantic speed record.
And they made it in just a little over 3.5 days. I can't imagine what happened in the home offices of the Cunard Line.
That's a beautiful ship. And I understand the Cunard Line gave it a 21 torpedo salute when it came in today.
The captain of the Queen Mary had sent a telegram to the captain of the United States saying, well, this proves that your girls really are faster than ours.
Heading westward now, bound for New York. This time, everybody suspected the United States was going to try to capture the record westbound too.
It smashed the record, this time by as much as 10 hours.
My grandfather did these detailed calculations that she broke the record by a greater percentage than ever had been done, and that just thrilled him to no end.
The race was over. We were back in New York, and we'd brought home the bacon.
On her return to New York City, Nearly everyone seemed to turn out to see the sleek new ship glide into the harbor with a fireboat and huge harbor craft escort. Her owners were awarded the Hales Trophy, symbolic of the blue ribbon of the Atlantic, and her crew paraded up Broadway for the traditional Heroes' Homecoming.
And that was a great symbol of national pride for the country who held the blue riband. That's at a time when these things actually mattered.
The famous jet came along in October 1958, ubiquitous silver tube, and made it 6 hours instead of 5 days. So consequently, she was left with the record, which happily she still holds and will never ever be beaten.
A modern-day cruise ship, most of them go about 20 knots. The United States could do that in reverse.
Debate continues to rage over the ship's top speed.
Because it's one of those mythical subjects that all fans of this ship talk about when they get together.
We cruised at 32.5 knots.
At full bore, she could do 38 knots plus.
I've heard lots of different figures bandied about.
45 knots during her trials. That's almost 55 miles an hour.
We all try to keep it real and honest.
She could go 50 miles an hour.
I know what I would like it to be.
36, 40, 42 knots.
That's pretty amazing.
There are those who claim to have been on the ship when she was doing 40 knots.
They kicked her up to about 42 knots on her maiden voyage. And you could feel it.
People say that she went as fast as 50 knots.
Her absolute top speed for 2 hours during her sea trials in the spring of '52 was 43 knots, which is about 46 miles an hour.
But that would take huge amounts of power and fuel consumption.
And then she did 39 knots on her maiden voyage.
Which is damn fast.
There are those who say the ship could do 50 knots.
I've heard it.
She made in excess of 50 knots.
No one really knows how fast she could go. She was never really let loose.
Wow, she must be fast. She's got some really big stacks.
I've always had a fascination with ships. My father took me on cruise ships as a child, knowing that this was the fastest ship ever built. It was almost second nature that when given the opportunity, I wanted to get on it. The main reasons I did it was because I thought that through light, you can see things, and if this magnificent ship is sitting in dark, how can it be appreciated? So I thought, you'd see it from the Walt Whitman Bridge, you'd see it from the surrounding areas, and this ship named after the country would be seen in a new light.
Just imagine the whistle blowing so loud that it resonated off the West Side Highway and the cobblestone streets and the checkered cabs delivering the passengers and steamer trunks going through the piers. Imagine the waiters and bellboys grabbing the boarding passes and bringing the passengers to their room for the first time.
Traveling across the Atlantic on the SS United States was like being at the Waldorf Astoria or the Ritz-Carlton or, the finest luxury hotel. There was a ratio of one crew member to every 1 or 2 passengers. So there were just teams of people to ensure that passengers traveled in the utmost comfort. The champagne was flowing and the glasses were tinkling and the music was playing, and it was just the scene of utmost elegance and glamour.
You were going to be taken care of, you were going to eat, you were going to drink, you were going to dance, you were going to have sophisticated conversations.
I think the first thing that strikes you when you get on a ship like that is the cleanliness, how impeccably clean everything is, and how the people, the personnel, how they're dressed, they're snappy and they're clean and white.
It's the best way I can describe it, very pristine.
What a sight it was to see all these men confident, knowing that these passengers were going to come aboard and we were going to do everything to give them a good trip, a good meal, and to make their experience aboard the SS United States one that they would never forget.
People get in a situation like that, they adjust very gracefully. You sit down and right away, it's like that's the way you live.
They used to say you could eat off the floor plates, and I think I did because I gained about 10 or 15 pounds.
Everything was silver service in the dining room. You could order anything in your room, any time of the night, whatever you felt like having.
If you were a child in the SS United States, the staff treated you like gold. They treated you like an adult.
A deck steward came up to me and asked me if I wanted anything. And I don't know what possessed me, but I just all of a sudden I said, I'd like a sirloin steak. And my mother looked at me and she was mortified. And, sure enough, about 15 minutes later, sirloin steak showed up. And I thought to myself, this is good, this will work.
The food was adequate.
And you would sit on the deck chairs, I remember, and someone would come by and take towels and wrap your feet.
The SS United States had passengers that would change their outfits 7, 8 times a day. They changed for breakfast, they changed after breakfast, they changed for lunch, they changed after lunch, they changed for supper, they changed after supper, and then wore a different gown and a different tuxedo every night. And it just knew right then that you were people that wasn't your normal type of people.
When they'd get on the elevator, not only did they look good, but they smelled good because they just came from their room, they put on a perfume. And I vividly remember how well they smelled.
The waiter that served us at dinner was this gentle giant from New York City. He sent us Christmas cards for the next 20 years. That kind of hospitality was felt throughout the ship.
She had some kind of spirit of her own, that she just wasn't really a ship. She was like a city.
When the door opened up and I saw Burt Lancaster, the first thing that just broke loose was, Burt!
The passenger list of the SS United States was just a who's who of the rich, the famous, the fabulous back in the 50s and 60s.
Grace Kelly, the Prince of Monaco.
Fred McMurray, Jane Wyman.
Benny Goodman.
Coco Chanel.
Milton Berle.
Marilyn Monroe.
Charlton Heston.
Merle Braun, Cary Grant, Sano Brazzi.
Kim Novak, Gary Cooper, the Gabor sisters, Jack Benny.
Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton.
Of course, the Trumans, Dwight Eisenhower.
JFK.
Bill Clinton traveled when he was on his way for his Rhodes Scholarship.
Salvatore Dali.
Leroy Neiman.
Judy Garland, Debbie Reynolds.
Duke and Duchess were regulars on board that ship.
Robert Vaughn, Sean Connery.
Jackie Gleason.
Some of them were very, very friendly and a lot of fun to be around, and some of them weren't. And I won't mention any names now.
In 1962, she was asked to carry the Mona Lisa. The SS United States was deemed the safest way to take the Mona Lisa back. Her guards would put size 17 men's shoes outside the door for the stewards to shine as they were trying to create the illusion that there was a big guy in this room and you didn't want to mess with him, when really it was just the Mona Lisa. That was actually fun to walk through the main ballroom because I was listening to the music that would have been played in the ballroom, and I was sort of trying to visualize what it would have been like in there with those beautiful etched glass panels that were illuminated with scenes of underwater life and those red barrel-back chairs around that round dance floor with the orchestra playing. And I was just trying to conjure the romance of what I love about ocean liners and ship travel. And that lifted my spirits. During her heyday, she was a star. I mean, she was truly the first American Idol.
Vogue magazine had fashion shoots on board.
What better place to showcase modern fashion than in the world's most modern ocean liner?
She was considered beautiful enough to appear in Playboy magazine when they commissioned Leroy Neiman to do paintings of her.
People have seen that painting, have always responded to it very positively. Thousands of paintings I've done, that's a favorite of mine. Go there and run into a spectacle, a mood, a feeling, what I see, what I experience. And people are so happy to be there. And I paint that. It worked. It was the way I felt, it was the way it was. The flavor of it is just right. I think I really pinned it down.
She released an album of music by the ship's orchestra.
We had Meyer Davis on the ship as the orchestra and Meyer Davis in person, which was very exciting because we all felt he was the best orchestra in town.
And then she became a movie star because Walt Disney had actually traveled transatlantic on the SS United States.
He was so impressed with his crossing that he was inspired to develop a whole film.
Michael Callan was the actor who played the young love interest.
Well, okay, let me think back. It's been a while, you know. I guess I was about 23 years old or so. We basically got on the ship and we shot all the exteriors on the way over there. And the ship was effortless. It was just a nice 5-day relaxing trip.
People on the east side of Manhattan
At 12 o'clock noon, could hear her gigantic, thunderous roar. Sailing at 12 noon, they would sit there, watch to the correct time.
This was a transatlantic liner, which means that it had to keep a very tight schedule.
She never slowed down. She was at high speed all the time.
It had a confidence that the country had at the time.
If I remember correctly, the United States was late twice in 17 years, and I'm not sure they'd even admit to the twice if there was anyone around from the company.
Because of being so light, when they go into the headwinds, which is coming back to New York, they had to slow it down. They couldn't keep up to 35 with knots that they normally would want to.
She may have docked late a couple of times because she didn't have the assistance of tugs, because the tugs were on strike, and so the captain had to do what I would consider the ultimate challenge in parallel parking, which is to dock a ship 990 feet long at a pier, parallel, without the assistance of tugs.
The ship was not involved with a single incident, a single accident. And that says a lot, I think, about the technology and, of course, as well as the crew.
That sense of speed, of dedicated speed, of an earnestness, a purpose, has not been recreated.
She was amazing, and she had a good crew.
My name is Charles Anderson. My father was Commodore John W. Anderson, who served as master of the ship from 1952 to 1964, the longest serving master aboard the SS United States. I remember very vividly coming down the West Side Highway in Manhattan, seeing the ship for the first time and turning into Pier 86, which was at that time a really bustling, active pier with longshoremen carrying cargo and passengers coming out and bands playing. So it was a very exciting experience for a young boy. And then once we got on board, of course, going up in the elevator to the master's quarters and seeing my dad there in uniform. On the way back to the States in 1944, he carried a passenger, a WAC lieutenant who was coming back from England, who later became his wife.
In memory, you go back to the days when you commanded the Erickson and first met Mary. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Well, I met her and I fell in love with her. I married her.
I was just telling my son I wish that we could go back to those days so he'd have an opportunity to stand on that bridge also.
I didn't actually get to meet my grandfather, and I feel like now that I've seen the ship, I've actually kind of met him in a way, and that just makes me feel good.
It had to go through many violent storms in the North Atlantic, which is probably the most dangerous ocean in the world.
The idea when a storm comes up, you don't know when it's going to end. You know, it just goes on and on and on.
Unbelievable waves. People don't realize how big they are.
It rose on this great wave, 70 or 80-foot wave, and it came down on the other side and plunged into the next wave.
Another passenger ship that was arriving from Europe, she took giant waves over her bow, and so did we, because we were in the same storm, and we survived all of it. No damage to the ship whatsoever. The SS United States arrived in New York on time. Matter of fact, she only was in port one day and out to sea, and this other ship, dead. Those 2,000 passengers below were comfortable, or they were having a cocktail, almost oblivious to the conditions outside.
Dad just brushed it off, and he never got seasick, so I never got seasick.
But you weren't supposed to get seasick.
No.
You weren't allowed.
You don't feel danger or anything. I think you feel very secure in that big tub, you know.
I try to imagine what William Francis Gibbs would think if he saw this today. I mean, this is truly a crime against art, against American history. I mean, where is the spirit of St. Louis? It's hanging in the Smithsonian. You know, where is Eli Whitney's cotton gin? It's been preserved.
A ship of that quality, of all of the innovations that it had, of all of the history that it created in its very short term of life as a working vessel, it didn't deserve that kind of treatment.
Why has this ship that was such A magnificent achievement in its time. Why has it been allowed to decay like this? It's a crime.
The United States sailed from July 3rd of 1952 until November 7th of 1969.
Like in the movie King Kong, the man said, "Looks like the airplanes got him." I guess the airplanes got the great passenger ships.
She started out as the world's fastest and most modern superliner, and it was all about speed.
Jet aircraft, of course, made transatlantic crossings by boat, an old-fashioned means of travel.
Then the marketing for the ship changed. It became sail with the unrushables. The whole idea was, you know, arrive relaxed and refreshed.
At the end, the Queen Mary would come in first-class passengers, there'd be 80 on a ship that could carry 1,000.
She was burning 600 tons of fuel a day, and, you know, that is ultimately cost prohibitive.
The government, which often subsidized these ships, was realizing that in future aircraft would probably move military troops and cargo. One by one, American passenger ships were being pulled out of service.
Ultimately, in 1969, in November, she arrived in New York, disembarked her passengers. She was to go to Virginia for her annual overhaul.
And when she got down there, United States Lines finally made the decision to pull the plug.
The Marine superintendent called me on the phone, and he said, well, we're going to lay the ship up. And he said, I want all the crew laid off. But some of the crew never believed the ship was going to stay laid up, and they left the ship and left their things aboard the ship and so forth, figuring they'd be called back. And they never were.
They had no idea that they had sailed the last voyage of the SS United States.
They dropped the paint brushes into the paint cans. The beds were left unmade. Everything was just stopped. They hermetically sealed her, dehumidified her, and that's the way she sat for years and years and years. She has been purchased over the years by a number of different owners who have had all good intentions of bringing her back.
It's like a soap opera character that never goes away.
There were several people that tried to raise money, but they never succeeded.
Just because you have the money to buy a rusting old ship for $2 or $3 million doesn't mean that you have the wherewithal to bring it back.
There's this hook of some kind of a plan always to save her, to bring her back. In the 70s, I remember it was floating hotel, floating motel, missionary center, trade fair ship, hospital ship, troop ship.
But none of the plans to bring her back to service in recent decades have come to fruition.
We can't turn the clock back. Everything that was aboard that ship has been taken off.
Glassware and bedding and china.
Dishware to doorknobs to towels to deck chairs, all auctioned off to the highest bidder.
Which wowed a lot of us when we saw the prices that some of these things were going for.
In 1984, Guernsey's, the New York-based auction house, they conducted the largest auction ever held.
Dealers tell me that the SS United States at this moment, 2007, is in the top 5 big sellers of ocean liner items. A wine bucket, very simple aluminum, $5,000. A simple stainless table, $10,000. People suddenly, by the 80s, they wanted pieces of a more romantic age. And so pieces of the United States fetched great prices and has prodded the brisk ocean liner memorabilia business today.
I've been accused of trying to reassemble the entire ship in my home, which may not be that far from the truth. For example, everything on this table is from the first-class dining room of the SS United States. I have collected first-class dining room serviceware, the table linens, the napkins, even the salt and pepper shakers are from the ship. The salt and pepper itself has been changed. It's really fun for me to be able to host a dinner party and recreate dinner aboard the SS United States. Here's to the big ship and to everything else you ever want.
This is the original deck chairs from the SS United States and the original blankets. I feel like I'm back on a ship again. I was a person aboard the SS United States, and I was walking along with the boat deck, which is where the lifeboats are, and it was a very windy day, and all of a sudden, a little kerchief came floating down. I looked up, and a young lady was mouthing, "It's mine." So I went up into the next deck and handed it back to her, and discovered a young lady who I fell in love with. And she's my wife for the last 49 years. Well, our children at the dinner table one night said, "Mom, "Are you sure you didn't do it on purpose?" And she said, "I'll never tell."
No, I won't.
Well, in the early 90s, the glorious SS United States was towed across the Atlantic by a single tug to the Ukraine and to Turkey for asbestos removal, decried by Greenpeace as the ship of death because this famed product that my grandfather was so delighted to use turned into a real liability. So tragic that the ship of state was suddenly being called the ship of death. I think that may have been her lowest moment.
On her return to New York City, nearly everyone seemed to turn out to see the sleek new ship glide into the harbor with a fireboat and huge harbor craft escort.
She's a hull. There's nothing left of the United States on the inside.
Like having someone you love suffer suddenly from dementia. You know, the beautiful person is there, but the soul is gone.
The current owners don't have to worry about the expense of removing the toxic materials. That's already been done. They have a blank slate. They can build a whole new ship inside there any way they want.
You have to use your imagination when you go down below to imagine how grand it was. That was kind of the glory day post-World War II, happy time in America, where it was all optimistic, and I think people would want to recapture that. The best place to get a feeling for what it's like is the main staircase. It kind of winds around, and it's got still the aluminum handrails, and you kind of can imagine people in gowns coming up and down to the main dining room, and you can really picture it. When they gutted it, 1950s, that modern style with the aluminum was kind of old-fashioned at that point. So they stripped it out. It didn't feel classic yet. And now it would be the greatest thing if they had just left the ship the way it was in the 50s. So there's not much left down there, the little bits and traces of things.
This is where we go into the engine room right here. Really? Yeah, that's where we're...
Robert Wogan, he's fearless. He spent hours by himself prowling through the engine room with a infrared video camera on his forehead and in darkness, and the ship is huge. It's easy to get lost.
If the decision were made to send the ship to the breakers, I think all of us would be very troubled.
That she never had that second chance that we've all wanted for her all these years.
I'd rather see her taken out to sea and sunk.
If it does, we still have our memories of it, our photos of it, and the known fact that it was the greatest ship ever built.
But it sounds like this latest proposal is one which really has a realistic prospect of succeeding.
My cell phone rings, and it's Mike Alexander from Colorado, and he says, "Joe, are you sitting down?" I said, "Yeah, Mike, what's up?" He said, "Norwegian Cruise Lines has just purchased the SS United States."
With the extraordinary statement that they were going to return her to cruise service.
Personally, I think it was very, very close to the scrapyard. Early 2003 or 2002, we began working with Norwegian Cruise Line.
I would say that the best place for this ship is out on the seas, with passengers, earning money, carrying the flag around the globe.
It will look like the United States. It will certainly have the speed of the United States or close. It'll be a modern cruise ship.
I think that the traditional ocean liner is really something special. And if you can update it and make the old ocean liner into a modern product that people would want to travel on, then you have a really attractive combination.
And I think people are probably ready for a slightly different twist to cruising. And they can certainly have it with a ship like the United States.
A rare chance for people to relive some of the most glamorous years of our cultural past.
The SS United States was 17 years young when she was laid up. That's fairly low mileage.
The physical condition, I can see her right now, might look terrible to the layman, but to me, underneath that thin veneer of paint, she's still in perfect condition.
There's very little deterioration in the hull.
The rivets on the inside, we entered some of the tanks, looked like they were installed 6 months ago.
And that's testament to the specification and how the ship was constructed.
And it is also a testament to the good old-fashioned American know-how of the men and women who designed and built that ship. She was built to last, and last she has.
Someone said she's a lady in waiting, and we hope that's true, because she has a lot more life in her.
We have some underwater cameras looking at the condition of the steel on the bottom of the ship, and no one's seen the bottom of the ship in almost 10 years. What we've seen so far today is the steel is in really good shape.
The preliminary engineering work that's been done suggests the hull is still 92% of original. She was so overbuilt to begin with that even with that 8% erosion, her hull is still by far the strongest of any ship still afloat today.
In the fantasy of it, I'd like to think that she would come back. However, the idea of refitting and rebuilding a 55-year-old ship, I don't know that I'd see that really happening.
I'm optimistic, but I'm realistic about it as well. This is a very challenging task.
Obviously, you know, it will cost more to reactivate this ship than to build a brand new ship.
It's an enormous engineering assessment first, and then a design, and then finally to actually do it.
In fantasy, I'd love to see it. In reality, I don't see it.
The shipyards that we have initially spoken to 2 years ago were not interested in doing it.
The workforce isn't familiar with a lot of the technology that was used to build this.
The whole riveting and repair process, the high tensile plates of steel.
The skills have really been lost. There is really no yard in America that's capable of completely rebuilding the ship.
A new ship could be built inside an old ship by a foreign yard as long as the exterior was done here domestically.
And then do the remaining fit out in an overseas yard where they have this 700 or 800 company infrastructure.
Refitting the United States would start with things like the engines, the old-fashioned steam turbines.
I heard that they're pickled and they're in good shape.
They are still complicated and expensive to run in this day and age.
Naturally, you'd want to be a purist and have the engines in, but
another problem would be the fact that structurally she's not designed for terraces. Everyone today wants balconies, terraces on their cabins.
The superstructure is going to change some. It has to be competitive.
We'll want to introduce the kind of amenities that people today are looking for, which is private balconies.
What about her deck space? Is it adequate as a cruise ship?
The ship would be completely redesigned inside, so I don't think you could take any of the existing spaces from the 1950s and say that was a smoking lounge and now it's going to be a card room. They won't be there. We will completely redesign the inside of the ship.
I'd like it to have more wood, and then I'd love to sail on it, yeah.
There will be wood on the rebuilt United States.
The apparent star cruisers are wise, and to invest this kind of money, I'm going to roughly say $500 million to restore her, would be, I can't see the return they would get on it.
The parent company is actually very enthusiastic about it, and they think it would really be something special to be able to bring the SS United States back to life.
I hope the funnels stay the same, and I understand they're going to remain pretty much in the same form.
The line of the ship is very much defined by these two stacks, so it'd be crazy to try and change that. I had so many messages almost threatening me if I touched the funnels. Whatever you do, leave the funnels.
The SS United States Conservancy is working with others to ensure that the vessel has a dignified future.
The Conservancy is playing a vital role in saving the ship.
Well, they may be the only way to save the ship.
We wanted to take a realistic approach with the powers that be at NCL to establish a working dialogue.
There are people who worked on the ship, there are people who were passengers on board that ship, and there are people who just are interested in the ship and its history.
The crew members who were on the maiden voyage of the SS United States, if you would, just to please stand so we can applaud the miracle. Do you have some there? We have it.
The more that we can do through public awareness, I think the more support there would be for investing money to bring the ship back.
If it doesn't sail again, they want to see the ship preserved.
The Conservancy has already started exploring what we're calling contingency planning.
One thought is to bring her back to New York as a hospitality hotel convention center / museum.
If not museum, just dress her up on the outside, paint her, and make her a beautiful adornment to the city waterfront.
If the alternative is to have it tied up alongside a pier as a floating convention center or something, well, I don't think that's a good end for the ship. The QM2 has demonstrated that a one-off unique ship that reminds people of transatlantic liner days can command a price for its tickets that is a multiple of a normal cruise ship.
The ship has a name and a reputation and a following that new cruise ships just don't have.
You know, this wonderful, feeling of being transported back to a different age.
And the thrill of being able to ride again on the flagship of the United States.
The intent is for her to recapture the blue ribbon.
And I think it would be fantastic to have a ship that could produce that kind of burst of speed again, the fastest ship in the world. It would be fun to go that fast, wouldn't it?
If you were a betting man, what would you say the chances of this ship being rebuilt and sailing again are?
Chances are reasonable. I wouldn't bet your pension fund on it, but I would take a flutter.
All I would ask of Norwegian Cruise Line is please do right by the ship. Please respect what she is. We understand, you're going to have to make changes, but keep her to the United States.
She is the SS United States on her way out to join the flagships of the world.
Bill, did you ever think in your wildest imagination that this ship would still be afloat in this year?
No, I didn't think I'd still be afloat this year.
I believe that the SS United States will sail again.
Her dance card has come.
Because I believe in the SS United States and I believe in miracles.
I would be first in line, although I think Mark Perry would beat me.
And I could be on voyage 401 sipping champagne.
She made 400 trips. God willing, I will be on trip 401 on this ship.
I'd like to be on that initial crossing, so make a reservation for me so I can do another layout.
I'd like to be on that ship one more time. That would be nice.
I hope they'll bring it back when it's all done and we can all see it.
I will be the first one to be the passenger on board. Why? I met my wife on board that ship.
Hopefully we'll all be on her.
It would just mean so much to me and most of all my mom and the rest of my family.
A new generation of people will look at her and say, that is our national flagship.
The country needs this, the president needs it.
I can't wait to get on and go.
I salute that ship, sir.
Another spool of wire?
Robert Wogan's lighting of the ship was both an extraordinary thing to see and a nail-biting experience.
All right, listen, before you go to the other side, I want you to wire a 110 to this right now.
But he was so determined to pull this off.
Rotten-ass wire.
And we weren't sure it was going to happen.
It wasn't needed. I thought I wasn't important.
A lot of the wire eroded from sun and weather, and the lights weren't getting enough amps. And we panicked and scrambled to rewire the entire ship. There were some lights that weren't working. Some had taken on water from the nor'easter that came through.
This is all very, very exciting.
And then, as it started to get dark, you saw the light on those funnels, and then the light in the radar mast, and then the light in the bridge.
For more information about the history and future of America's flagship, the SS United States, please visit www.bigshipfilms.com. SS United States Lady in Waiting is available to own on DVD. It features many extras, including expanded interviews. To order a copy of Lady in Waiting, please visit www.bigshipfilms.com/DVD.